So I want you to imagine sitting on your own front porch, completely paralyzed, with these cold steel handcuffs just biting into your wrists.
That is a terrifying thought right out of the gate.
Right. And you are staring down a 10 to 20-year prison sentence.
Well,
But it gets worse. You are watching your completely innocent roommate cheerfully wave hello to the undercover cops who are actively threatening to ruin his life.
oh man.
Yeah. Now, add one more detail to this absolute nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
For an absolute fact that just 30 feet away inside that house, sitting out in the open on a coffee table, is a quarter-pound of illegal mushrooms and a distribution-level stash of marijuana.
I mean, that is the absolute definition of an inescapable trap. You can almost
Yeah.
feel the physical weight of that panic just visualizing it.
It's suffocating. So welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking you through a first-hand internet confessional account from a former high school pot dealer.
And it is a wild one.
It really is.
Oh.
Our mission today isn't just to walk you through some crazy true crime story, though. We are plunging straight into the sheer emotional whiplash of this event.
Because the emotional shift is just staggering.
Exactly. We want to dissect how a phenomenally boring afternoon instantly morphed into a high-stakes psychological thriller. And, really explore how the human brain processes absolute terror to execute an audacious bluff.
Yeah, we are looking at a collision between absolute lazy complacency and the sudden, violent realization that your entire life is about to end.
So put yourself in this dealer's shoes. Let's set the scene. It is just a lazy afternoon. Our source, the dealer, is hanging out at home with his girlfriend.
Sounds pretty normal.
Totally mundane. They decide to walk down to the neighborhood Circle K, which is just a few houses down the street, to grab some beer. And he knows the clerk there pretty well.
Okay, so a familiar environment.
Very familiar. The clerk asks if he knows where to get a dub sack, which is just a $20 bag of weed. The dealer says sure, he'll be back. And here is the tiny, seemingly insignificant detail.
This is the crucial part, right?
Yes. The clerk pays him right then and there. He hands him a crumpled $20 bill in advance.
So keep that $20 bill in the back of your mind. It seems completely throwaway, just a casual, messy transaction between acquaintances.
It's just $20.
Right. But the mechanics of how that money changed hands is going to become the structural load-bearing beam for everything that happens later.
I love how these tiny choices just snowball. So the dealer actually forgets about the request for a couple of hours.
Of course he does.
Yeah, he goes home, hangs out, probably watches some TV. Eventually he remembers, weighs out the bag, and heads back to the Circle K. He waits for the store to empty out, and he and the clerk go out behind an icebox in the parking lot.
So they are outside now.
Yeah, they're just smoking, chatting, and he casually hands over the bag. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the dealer completely, utterly misses the glaring warning signs of what is about to happen.
He absolutely does.
Yeah.
The environment around him is actively broadcasting a massive threat, but his brain is actively filtering it out.
I really have to push back on our source here for a second. He notes that it's an empty lot, except for this beat-up Volvo facing the record store next door.
Uh-huh.
But this beat-up Volvo has completely tinted limo-style windows. If you are actively dealing drugs, how do you completely ignore a beat-up Volvo with limo tint facing you in an empty lot?
It seems obvious to us now.
Right. Wouldn't a criminal be hypervigilant? Why does routine override basic self-preservation?
What's fascinating here is the biological mechanism of inattentional blindness, specifically driven by environmental complacency.
Intentional blindness.
Yeah. Think about the last time you drove home from work and suddenly pulled into your driveway with no active memory of the last 3 miles. Your brain is essentially a prediction engine.
So it just fills in the blanks.
Exactly. When you are in a highly familiar environment like your neighborhood Circle K, a place you've walked to 100 times, your brain predicts safety based on past data. It filters out anomalies to save cognitive energy. He didn't see a police surveillance vehicle. He just saw the blurry, safe backdrop of his own daily life.
So his guard isn't just down, it's totally non-existent, which makes what happens next incredibly violent to his nervous system.
Yeah, total shock.
2 men suddenly get out of this Volvo. They approach the dealer and the clerk casually. The dealer describes them so vividly. One is a tall, skinny guy wearing 100% denim. He calls him Canadian Tuxedo.
That's amazing.
And the other guy looks exactly like Dog the Bounty Hunter in a beige sweater, so he calls him Beige Dog.
They just stroll up, casual as can be, and ask how the guys are doing. The dealer and the clerk are so oblivious they actually look at each other, trying to figure out if the other one knows these random guys.
And then the trap snaps shut. The two guys flash badges and scream at the top of their lungs, "EPD, you're under arrest."
Just absolute chaos.
They violently cuff them, separate them, and start searching them. It is the real-world equivalent of a horror movie jump scare, but it's happening in broad daylight next to an icebox.
Let's talk about the biology of that moment, because that is the emotional whiplash we are focusing on. In neuroscience, this is a textbook amygdala hijack.
Break that down for me. What is physically happening in his head when they start screaming?
So, the brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, receives an overwhelming surge of sensory input. The shouting, the physical restraint, the sudden, crushing realization that his freedom is gone.
Right.
The amygdala sounds a massive biological alarm that physically overrides the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational, logical part of your brain right behind your forehead.
So he literally can't think straight.
Right. The blood quite literally rushes away from the complex decision-making centers of the brain and dumps into the primitive survival centers. The shock to his nervous system is so severe precisely because his baseline level of anxiety 10 seconds earlier was absolute zero.
And the terror doesn't peak there. It just shifts gears. Beige Dog starts going through the dealer's phone. He finds dubious texts. He finds more crumpled up $20 bills in his pockets.
Building a case right there.
Exactly. He starts fishing for a confession, trying to get the dealer to admit he's doing a lot of business today. But then the cops do something highly irregular.
This part is wild.
Instead of throwing him in the back of a squad car and taking him to the station, they walk the dealer and his utterly terrified girlfriend back to the dealer's own front porch.
Which completely changes the psychological dynamic of the interrogation. They move from a public, chaotic takedown to a highly intimate space. They bring the threat right to his sanctuary.
They sit him down on his own porch and tell him they've been watching him come and go. And they say, "Look, we just want to make sure you don't have a pound of heroin in there."
Setting the bait.
Right. Let us search the house, and we'll just charge you with a misdemeanor today. Refuse, and you go to jail right now with a felony.
It's a classic squeeze tactic. They are offering an illusion of control to a suspect who actually has none.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the dealer is sitting there in handcuffs, refusing to let them in, just begging them to call his lawyer. And right in the middle of this intense, terrifying standoff, his roommate walks out the front door.
Talk about bad timing.
He just says hi, gets in his car, and drives away.
We have to look at the psychological profile of this roommate because it is so central to the emotional weight of this story. The source explicitly notes this roommate is a total nerd with a great lucrative job.
A completely straight-edge guy.
Great. He rarely drinks, never smokes, and is completely blissfully removed from the dealer's underground lifestyle.
He just wanders through the scene like an NPC in a video game, completely oblivious to the fact that his roommate is in handcuffs, sweating out a decade in prison.
It's almost comical.
It is, until Beige Dog, the cop, watches this roommate leave, and he instantly weaponizes him. He turns to the dealer and says, "If you don't let me search the house, I'm going to park squad cars on your lawn.
Oh, what?
I'm going to extract everyone from this house. We will wait on a warrant, and when we finally get it, we will charge everyone who lives here with every single thing we find in any room."
That is brutal.
Now, the dealer later realizes this threat isn't fully legally sound, but in the moment, he is completely paralyzed.
Wow.
How effective is this kind of emotional leverage? Why threaten someone's innocent friends rather than just pressing harder on the suspect directly?
It is devastatingly effective because it shifts the entire emotional landscape of the interrogation. What we are seeing here is the application of emotional coercion through collateral damage.
Collateral damage.
Yeah. Think about how your own brain handles threats. When an interrogator threatens you with prison, your brain defaults to self-preservation. Your defensive walls go up and you brace for impact.
Makes sense.
But when an interrogator threatens an entirely innocent bystander, especially someone you care about and live with, they bypass those self-preservation circuits entirely. They trigger guilt. They basically weaponize your empathy.
So the cops recognize that the dealer is actually more terrified of ruining his nerdy roommate's life than he is of going to jail himself.
Precisely. The psychological burden of destroying a straight-edge kid's career is a much heavier emotional weight than his own arrest. The police are shifting the moral responsibility of the raid onto the dealer's shoulders.
That is incredibly manipulative.
It's a high-pressure tactic designed to break his resolve by making him feel like a villain to his own friends. If the roommate's life is ruined, it won't be the cop's fault. It will be the dealer's fault for not cooperating.
And the reason that threat is so utterly suffocating is because the dealer knows exactly what is sitting inside that house. Remember the trap we set up at the beginning?
Oh yeah, the stash.
Just 30 feet away from where he is handcuffed on the porch, sitting on his bedroom coffee table, is what he calls a quarter pound of mushrooms.
And we really need to clarify the visual evidence of the stash. It isn't just sitting there in one innocent-looking bulk bag.
No, it is neatly weighed out into individual ounces and eighths. It looks exactly like what it is, an active, highly organized distribution setup. Plus, there's all his weed in there, too.
So it's a massive amount of evidence.
Yeah, our source explains that his area was totally dried up on mushrooms, he had gotten a steal of a deal, and he had all his buyers lined up. The timing of this arrest was catastrophic.
The worst possible moment.
If the cops go in with a warrant, they find the mushrooms, the weed, the baggies, the scales. It's game over.
The legal reality is just bleak. He's facing multiple high-level felony charges with clear intent to distribute. The prison time wouldn't be months, it would be years.
So his back is pressed against an impossible wall. He cannot let them toss the whole house because they will absolutely find his stash, and based on Beige Dog's threat, they will likely drag his innocent roommate down with him just by association.
A total nightmare scenario.
So from this state of absolute crushing panic, the dealer pivots to an audacious, unbelievable risk. He proposes a counter deal. He says, I will let one of you in to search just my bedroom and we'll be done with it.
Which is an incredibly desperate gambit.
Really desperate.
The source notes he fully knew that once he voluntarily let a police officer inside, the cop could legally do whatever he wanted, regardless of any verbal agreement on the porch. But he felt the walls closing in and had zero options left.
Beige Dog actually agrees to these terms. He leaves his partner, Canadian Tuxedo, out of the porch with the dealer's girlfriend. And our source notes that as he stands up to walk inside, his girlfriend is looking at him with absolute, unadulterated terror.
I can only imagine.
Her face is screaming, what the completely unprintable expletive are you doing?
Right, because put yourself in her position. She knows what is on that coffee table. She assumes her boyfriend has just cracked under the psychological pressure and surrendered both of their lives.
But he hasn't surrendered. He has formulated a bluff so insane I can hardly believe it worked. He leads Beige Dog upstairs. They walk down the hallway, and the dealer walks right past his own bedroom door.
Oh my God.
He notes, thank God the door was closed. He walks past his door, and he leads the cop straight into the straight-edge roommate's room.
The sheer audacity of that move is just breathtaking.
This is where I have to use an analogy. This is like a matador waving a red cape at a charging bull. But the bull is inside your own house, and the cape is your completely innocent friend's bedroom.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
But wait, hold on. I'm genuinely confused here.
Yeah.
You told me 10 minutes ago that this guy suffered an amygdala hijack. You said his logical brain shut down and the blood rushed away from his prefrontal cortex.
Right, the biological panic.
How does a guy go from a total biological panic attack to possessing the cognitive bandwidth to execute a master-level sociopathic bluff?
That is an excellent question, and it gets to the core of how humans process extreme fear. If we connect this to the bigger picture of human stress responses, we usually talk about fight, flight, or freeze.
Right, the classic responses.
Most people under that level of emotional coercion freeze. The girlfriend on the porch. She is frozen in terror. But for a select few individuals, an overwhelming, massive spike of adrenaline doesn't cause paralysis. It causes a phenomenon known as hyperfocus.
So his brain just forcefully organizes the chaos.
Yes. His brain recognized a tiny, impossibly narrow window of survival, and to get him through that window, it forcefully shut down all emotional processing.
That is wild.
It's an extreme form of psychological compartmentalization. He isn't calm because he's relaxed. He's calm because his nervous system has muted every single input except the immediate task of survival.
And you want to talk about executing a task under pressure. Let's look at what happens inside that room. Beige Dog is actively tossing this innocent nerd's room. He's pulling out desk drawers. He's looking in the closet. He's literally lifting the mattress over.
A really thorough search.
Right. And while this is happening, the dealer notices the computer monitor on the desk. The screensaver is a giant glowing photo of the nerd roommate and his girlfriend glaring out into the room. Oh, no. That would ruin everything. So, while the cop is distracted, physically flipping the bed, the dealer quietly reaches over and clicks the monitor off, turning the screen black and hiding the photo.
From a cognitive standpoint, that tiny detail is the most impressive part of the story. When you are under life or death stress, your peripheral awareness usually vanishes entirely. You get tunnel vision.
So you shouldn't even notice a screensaver.
Exactly. The fact that he possessed the mental bandwidth to notice a screensaver instantly deduced the catastrophic implication that the cop might see the photo, realize it wasn't the dealer's room, and know he was being played, and then physically execute the subtle, quiet action of turning off the monitor. It demonstrates an astonishing level of situational awareness under fire.
It really is the ultimate sleight of hand. And the wildest part of this entire ordeal, the bluff works. Beige Dog finds absolutely nothing in the nerd's room because there's nothing there.
Unbelievable.
He sticks to his verbal agreement, doesn't check any other rooms down the hall, and walks back downstairs with the dealer.
And the dealer notes in his confession that he now has a massive shit-eating grin on his face.
Which, again, put yourself in the girlfriend's shoes on the porch. That has to be the most confusing, reality-breaking moment of her life.
Seriously.
She looks like she's about to pass out from stress, assuming her future is over. And her boyfriend just walks out the front door smiling with the cop who just searched their house.
You're seeing the violent transition from the hyper-focused adrenaline of the bluff crashing directly into the euphoria of survival.
Now, to be clear, Beige Dog still hits him with a felony charge on the spot. He's not walking away totally clean right then and there.
Yeah.
But they leave. They don't take him away in cuffs right that second for the 10 to 20 years.
All right.
So what does this all mean? How does a story with these kind of stakes actually resolve? Well, the dealer hires a great, very expensive attorney who happens to be friends with the prosecutor. But the real saving grace of his legal case goes all the way back to the very beginning of the story.
Back to the Circle K.
That tiny, mundane moment at the Circle K. The $20 prepay.
It's the ultimate butterfly effect.
Exactly. It's an absolute butterfly effect of illegality. Because the clerk gave him that crumpled $20 bill an hour before the actual drug drop-off, the undercover cops, sitting in that tinted Volvo, never actually saw any money change hands.
And that is a crucial foundational legal distinction. Because no cash was exchanged during the sting itself, the transaction lacked the definitive, legally observable criteria for a high-level distribution charge.
Wow, just because of that 20.
Yes. The police only witnessed the handing over of a bag, which could technically be construed as a gift. The lawyer was able to use that microscopic technicality to break the chain of evidence and knock the felony down to a much, much lesser charge deliverance of marijuana.
And because of that technicality, the prosecutor recommends the absolute minimum sentence. The dealer pays a $121 fine. He does 80 hours of community service at a local music venue, where he actually gets to see a ton of concerts for free.
Unbelievable outcome.
And after that, he officially retires from selling. He's completely done with the life. So I have to ask you, looking at this whole unbelievable arc, was this guy a criminal mastermind who expertly played the system, or literally just the luckiest guy on planet Earth?
Synthesizing the emotional and literal facts, it is a fascinating intersection of immense privilege and sheer dumb luck.
The privilege being the lawyer.
The privilege is obvious, yeah. Having the financial resources to hire a highly connected, expensive attorney is what ultimately navigates the legal system in his favor. If he had relied on a public defender drowning in a crushing caseload, the outcome might have been very different, regardless of the prepay.
That makes sense.
But the prepay itself, the fact that the clerk happened to have $20 ready early and the dealer happened to forget the weed the first time, that is sheer luck.
Right, because think about the alternate timelines here. If he had brought the weed the first time, the transaction happens inside the store, completely out of sight of the Volvo.
Exactly.
If the clerk paid him at the icebox during the drop, the cops see the cash, he gets a felony, and the bluff doesn't even matter. The timing is impossibly precise.
But emotionally, what we are seeing at the end of his confession is a textbook biological response to near-miss trauma.
How so?
In behavioral psychology, a near-miss can fracture in two different directions. Sometimes a near-miss reinforces bad behavior. Think about a gambler at a roulette table. They experience a near-miss, and it actually triggers dopamine.
Oh, like they almost won.
Right. It makes them want to double down, feeling like they're due for a win. But when the stakes are existential, when you brush right up against the absolute destruction of your life and you survive entirely by the skin of your teeth, the brain processes that trauma differently.
It scares them away from it.
Exactly. The euphoria of the escape doesn't make him feel invincible. It strips away the complacency we talked about at the beginning. It makes him realize how terrifyingly fragile his luck actually was. It scared him straight. That's why he walked away from the game.
He took his $121 fine, his free concert tickets, and he left the underground economy forever. It is just an unbelievable emotional arc. We watched a guy go from a boring, complacent afternoon where his brain couldn't even register a police car to the sheer biological terror of an undercover sting.
It really is a roller coaster.
We saw the agonizing guilt of having his innocent roommate threatened, and we analyzed how the only way out was an incredibly risky, hyper-focused bluff that relied entirely on exploiting that exact same innocent person's space.
This raises an important question, one that sits right at the heart of this entire event, and I want you, the listener, to think about this. We've talked extensively about the mechanics of the fear response and the execution of the bluff, but what happens to our moral compass when we're pushed to the absolute edge of ruin?
That is a tough one.
Think about what he actually did in that hallway. Did the dealer violate his innocent roommate's trust by using his private bedroom as a literal physical shield against the police? Or by taking all the heat onto himself, risking an immediate, guaranteed arrest if the cops saw that screensaver or caught him in the lie, just to keep the police away from the real stash that would have sunk the entire household? Was it actually the ultimate act of protection?
Man, that is absolutely something to sit with. The ground opens up, the mundane shatters, and you find out exactly what you are willing to do to survive.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep questioning the wild stories you encounter, and remember to look a little closer at the cars parked in your neighborhood today. We'll catch you next time.